Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to The Upside. I'm Jonathan Oleski with JMOR. This is our virtual show brought to you by the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore and JMOR to keep Jewish Baltimore informed during this time of great uncertainty. If you would like to ask questions during today's show, we ask that you do two things. Either type them into the Zoom chat or type them onto JMOR's Facebook page, and we'll be sure that we ask our guests your questions. It's my pleasure to introduce your host today, Beth Goldsmith, chair of the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore, and Dr. Scott Rifkin, publisher of JMOR. Beth and Scott, take it away.
Thank you, Jonathan. In recent years, we've seen companies and organizations investing in addressing issues of social justice, including racial disparities in their organizations. Jews historically have played a significant role in this effort, advocating for change and the advancement of social justice. Now, as we face a new chapter in our country's history, there's a strong desire among our community members to learn more and think about their own biases in order to understand our place in the quest for a more just and open Jewish community. Synagogues and Jewish organizations, including the Associated Network, have long participated in social justice programs. And now there are many new initiatives, including a series hosted by the Baltimore Jewish Council, an agency of the Associated. Scott, please introduce our guests.
Hi, Beth. Thank you. First of all, Beth, last time we spoke, you had beautiful artwork behind you. I'm expecting an ongoing changing gallery. I'm getting spoiled at this point. So no artwork today. We're going to have to work on that. Anyhow, thank you for doing the show today, and I'm glad all our guests are here. We have three guests today. We have Sarah Mersky Miicke, Deputy Director of the Baltimore Jewish Council. We have Tracie Decker, co-curator and facilitator of the 18-Day Focus, and I'm sure we're going to hear all about the 18-Day Focus in a couple of minutes. And Yosef Webb-Cohen. Everybody's got three names today. I like it. Everybody's got three names. Yosef Webb-Cohen, who is the co-curator and facilitator of the 18-Day Focus. So thank you all for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Good. Let's start with the first question for Sarah. Tell us about the Baltimore Jewish Council. Let's start at the top.
Sure. The Baltimore Jewish Council is the government and community relations arm of the Associated. We advocate on all levels of government for the Associated, its agencies, as well as all Marylanders. We have successfully received funding for aging Holocaust survivors and security funding for religious institutions, to name a few, as well as worked on policies to change our hate crimes laws in Maryland and helping working Marylanders by advocating for earned sick leave and helping older adults by getting stronger protections in assisted living facilities. On the community relations side, we work with other religious organizations to build relationships and better understandings by having joint programs, including our annual Blessing Bag event, where we make over 300 blessing bags for the homeless, as well as interfaith programs like our Trialogue series. A large part of our community relations portfolio is building relationships with other communities, including our One Park Heights initiative, partnered with Park Heights Renaissance, and other community groups. For more information on what we do, you can visit our BJC website, which just got a fancy new facelift. Thanks.
Very good. Talk about the role of BJC when it comes to racial injustice and why we care about everyone.
Sure. So the Baltimore Jewish Council had focused a bulk of our community relations work on our interfaith and interethnic programs and lectures and intra-Jewish programs based on our religious denominations or generations. But we have not focused much time on calling out the problems in our own community and within ourselves, especially as it relates to who we think Jewish people are or should be, and how that perspective may be wrong and damaging, especially as it relates to race. We decided we needed to shift some of our focus on ourselves and our Jewish community to start to become a more inclusive community for all Jews, especially those who have felt uncomfortable in traditional Jewish spaces. Racial justice is paramount to the Jewish community because as Jews, we oppose systems of oppression and injustice, even when sometimes we are the creators of those systems in our own Jewish communities. So over the past few months, the Baltimore Jewish Council with other partners has had a few small group programs on race and racism within our community. But we realized we needed to have a larger scale program for everyone in the community to participate. And that's why we teamed up with Tracie Guy Decker and Yosef Webb-Cohen, who are the curated and will facilitate our 18-day exploration of racial justice, the Baltimore Jewish Community Learns Together. And so far, we actually have over 25 organizations and 260 people registered for this program that Tracie and Yosef will talk more about.
So I grew up in a home where I would hear from my mom, who was a volunteer in Baltimore City in the Head Start program, and I first started with volunteers, and was really a social activist in her day. And how, as Jews, we needed to care more than other folks about racial justice, about social justice, because as folks who have been discriminated against, we need to understand that and understand the impact that has on the community around us. Talk about that for a moment, and the place that Jewish folks have in understanding not just racial discrimination within the Jewish community, but racial discrimination about the community around us.
Sure. So, the Jewish community is a community that has been oppressed, and we have always had anti-Semitism, which is on the rise now. But it's so important for us to, one, actually recognize that the Jewish community isn't just a white community. We're very diverse ethnically and racially. And the reason it's so important for our community to help all communities who have been oppressed is because if we don't do the right thing and stand up for other communities, how do we expect other communities to also stand up for anti-Semitism and the oppression of the Jewish people?
Thanks, Sarah. And I'm going to jump in because I really do want to get to what you were segueing us into and what Tracie and Yosef are here to tell us about, which is the 18-day challenge. The 18-day, I guess it's called the 18-day focus. I registered right away. I want you to know, because it sounded so intriguing. Now I get to really hear more about what the 18-day focus is. So Yosef, Tracie, I'm sure you guys know which one of you wants to begin.
So I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Yosef, which is actually how it happened chronologically to have this. Sarah and I have been scheming for a while about ways to expand the number of people within the Baltimore Jewish community that we could be talking to. And I had this idea to do a 28-day challenge based on an existing book that is not specifically written for Jews. And it turned out that was not an option because of the intellectual property rights on that book. And so Sarah and I said, well, what if we just made one? And we did it explicitly for a Jewish audience. And it got traction and folks seemed interested. And as the scope grew and I realized just how big it was, I realized that I needed a partner in crime. And I definitely wanted that person to be a Jew of color. And I wanted that person to do DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion work for a living. And Yosef is the guy. And so I brought him in to help. And so that's kind of how it started. Yosef, you want to talk about how we've been working together to build this thing?
Sure. I think what's interesting is Tracie and I didn't really know each other before this, but we had a whole lot of people in common. It's like I'd like to think we're at opposite ends of a very big banquet table, and we don't realize we're sitting at the other end of it. And like when we started talking, we're like, oh, you know this person, you know that person, and we knew all these people, and we both had this passion for this work, and it's really just to make the Jewish community a more inclusive space, and to actually realize, for the Jewish community just to realize what it is, because there's this perception that all Jews are white, all Jews look like Jerry Seinfeld, and that's just simply not the case historically or even in our own country. And so we started developing a series of emails and facilitated conversations. So for those of you who have signed up, you kind of know a little bit what you're getting into, but it's 18 days, you get an email with either an article or a video and a short set of questions that you kind of work through on your own. And then we have at the beginning and the end and twice in the middle, like hour-long sessions where you can join a Zoom with Tracie and I and have a conversation about how's it going, what's coming up for you, what are you learning, and all this to be scaffolded on each other. So at the end, you have a different lens with which to look at the world and our Jewish community.
Who's the target? Who are the folks that are going to be invited to participate?
Everyone, the entire Jewish community. So those who self-identify as Jewish, whether you belong to a synagogue or not, whether you keep kosher or not, whether you go to a Seder or not, and also those who are Jewish adjacent. So the members of our families who are maybe non-Jewish members of an interfaith family, or our coworkers and colleagues who are Jewish adjacent because they work in the Jewish community. We really want this to be as big a tent as possible. The idea is really to give us one of the ideas is to give the community a shared set of resources. I found that, especially, as a Jewish communal professional, as things started to really blow up again in the country, not literally, but as we're watching unrest and protests, and we're all kind of really thinking more deeply about racism as a systemic and structural issue, I heard a lot of Jews say, I don't know how to think about this. I don't even know where to start. I don't know what to do, and I don't know what to read, and I don't know who to listen to. And so we're trying to fill that gap so that there is at least kind of a baseline for us to think and talk about these issues, which we've been taught, let's face it, as Americans, to not think and talk about, as white Americans in particular.
I like the comment about filling the gap, because one of the problems we have in society as a whole is the folks who try to fill the gap who have negative intent. And particularly in social media, where there is a huge amount of craziness that gets promoted by folks with bad intent. And it grabs people who are wandering. So it strikes me that when you say fill the gap with positive, useful information on a topic like this, that's really a really good way to look at it.
Would you guys share with us, please, a little bit about how you came to this? You personally, Yosef, you personally, Tracie, how did you get into the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the first place?
So the way I got here is an interesting story. So I'm a trained mental health chaplain. And so I used to facilitate a lot of groups at a mental health hospital. And there was an opening for intergroup dialogue facilitation at University of Maryland, College Park. And so with my group facilitation work, I was able to transition into that, where it was a cultural competency course, which is teaching about racism, Islamophobia, sexism, all the isms you can think of. And that transitioned into being able to be hired to do coaching, facilitations like this, and other things in the DEI world. That's like my professional transition. But really, I grew up as a mixed race kid in a predominantly white area. And I was engaged with dealing with racism, even at such a young age that I didn't realize it was racism at the time. I remember times going back, oh, I don't know why these people don't like me. And then realizing, 20 years later, oh, it's because I'm brown. And to kind of like, those two kind of came to a head about 8-10 years ago. And I was just kind of like, oh yeah, I need to start doing this more, to engage with folks more, just to have the conversation. Like, I'm not interested in debating people, but I am interested in having like a dialogue. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do here is create a shared lexicon where we can all take a set of resources and say, when I'm talking about socialization, this is what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about racism, this is what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about anti-Semitism, this is what I'm talking about. Because also the language changes so fast. So for me, it's very much like my personal experience as a person of color. And now I have a young 1-year-old who's mixed race, Jewish. And I'm like, oh, I literally have to keep doing this for him as well. And so it just starts to feed into itself. And then around 2016, a lot of things started happening, and the requests for more DEI work have just increased. And so it's been a large part of what I'm doing is racial cultural assessments, going to a place and say, what's the culture of your synagogue, your institution, your organization? Is it Does it have racist tendencies? And what does that mean? And what does it mean to have racist tendencies versus be racist? So
Thank you. Tracie, would you also weigh
Yeah.
in on your path?
Of course. Thank you. So I actually don't think I am, I think of myself as a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional, which is part of why I needed Yosef to conspire with me. I think of myself more as an anti-racist or an anti-oppression educator. And I really came to it because of my own journey from what I'll call racial innocence into a greater awareness. And the fact of the matter is that I'm still learning. I always will be. And so for me, this is a both and it always will be both. I have something to contribute. I've learned a lot and I am still learning and always will be. And actually, I'm hoping that by the end of our 18-day program, that a lot of the participants will be able to hold that both and as well. So, and I came to the work because that was really your question, Beth. I came to the work. It really started in a specific moment for me. It was a quiet journey before April of 2015, but it became an explicit journey after the uprising here in Baltimore, after Freddie Gray was murdered. And like the rest of the city, I was watching that CVS burn and I started to cry. And this voice in my head that I now identify as somehow divine intervention said to me, a man is dead, but you're crying because of property damage. You have got to adjust your priorities. And from that moment, I have been learning and studying and talking and working on fulfilling that both and to get more on the I have something to contribute side. So that's my nutshell story.
Thank you. Thank you both for sharing that. And you mentioned about learnings, what you hope people will take away. Can you share a little bit more of what you do hope we will learn? What will participants learn about in this program?
So we take on a lot of, concepts, words that get thrown around. Yosef mentioned a couple of them: socialization, privilege, anti-Semitism, implicit bias. So there's a basic kind of vocabulary that folks will gain. But I think for me, I'm especially interested in the folks who have white privilege who take this on to really start to be able to look at themselves and their role and place in society with curiosity instead of judgment, and with a real look to say, if discomfort arises, to kind of get behind that and say, where's that coming from, rather than being ruled by the discomfort and using that as a reason to stop talking. Yosef, What are you thinking?
Well, and I would say for myself, a couple key themes, one of which is that racism and anti-Semitism are both tools of white supremacy.
Amen.
And they're designed to keep minoritized populations from engaging with and supporting each other. I think that's a big one. And to see how racism and anti-Semitism both keep us from living up to our full potential. And really, I think the best, my pie in the sky, like this is what I really want, is I just want people to walk out of here learning something and to have a different lens with which to look at the world they inhabit. Like to be able to say, oh, I need to change the filter on this and now I can see things differently. And engage with the world in a different way. And I think that for me would be those two major ideas, those themes are probably what I would like the most and maybe also be able to critically engage with some thoughts and ideas that we all have.
How should the person who participates in this program, I listen to what they should learn and I understand that, and those are great goals. But how do you hope it impacts their lives and how they respond to the world around them? I mean, take the case of the of the person who runs a business, or the case, they take a couple case thoughts and say, how do we hope they look at the world differently, and what impact does it have on the people around them?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question, but I'll try, and you can push back on me if I'm not answering the question you're asking. So I'm hoping that the awareness that this program will help to either start or grow for folks will lead to, for that business owner, when after we're allowed to be in person again, when someone comes into the store or the restaurant who makes them uncomfortable, they sort of stop and say, okay, well, why is this? Is this real? Is this discomfort actually because of something this person is doing? Or is it the biases that are based on things that are not real? So that there can be that moment of self-reflection. It may be that person is making you nervous because, they are shifty-eyed and there's a bulge that looks like a gun. And that's a legitimate reason to be made nervous by someone in your business. But if it's just because they're young and Black, that's not a legitimate reason to be made nervous. And so those are the kinds of questions that I'm hoping people will ask themselves, and in terms of changes in behavior. But more specifically, because we are targeting the Jewish audience, I'm hoping that when we are able to be in public again, that people who look like you and me, Scott, when we see someone who looks like Yosef, who we haven't seen before at an oneg, we're not like, hey, are you Jewish? Or do you know where the extra chairs are? Or, how are you Jewish? Or why are you here? But rather say, wasn't that a great sermon? Or these are my favorite kind of cookies. Would you like one? So that's really more my goal than sort of the business owner case.
Tracie, you handled that great. It was exactly what I'm looking for. And the reason I brought it up is, look, I run a business, and a lot of people who watch this show in the community run businesses. And I looked around my business recently. It's a relative startup over a couple of years. We got about 75 people. And of the 75 people, 74 of them were white. Mm-hmm. And I said to our folks recently, is it that we can't find people of color to work for us who have the qualifications? Or are we not looking hard and looking in the right places and really thinking about how we do our interviews? We had done very well on female inclusion and women in leadership, but we hadn't done very well when it came to folks of color. And I think that's a real takeaway from what you all are doing, is to look inside of ourselves and say, why is the scenario around us that we didn't really notice before? Why is it the way it is? And what can we do differently?
Well, and I would add two things to that idea of the business owner. Hopefully after this program, someone will stop and go, why are there not as many people of color who are qualified for this job? Like systemically, why, if I want X position filled, why is everyone who's applying for it only white? Like why is it, why do people of color possibly not have the same qualifications? Like, why is that, what's that systemic knowledge drain that we have? And I would also say diversity, equity, and inclusion is important for business. Some of the most fascinating research on diversity, equity, and inclusion comes out of businesses, because the more diverse your staff is, the more money you make. Like there's a direct, like, if you have a diverse staff, you have a diversity of ideas and perspectives, therefore you will make more money. If you have a diverse staff, more people will see themselves when they come into your business and therefore spend more money. When I walk into a business that's entirely white, if I'm not followed, I very quickly go, I'm not sure they have the same perspectives on life I do. I might not come back. If I am followed, I'm definitely not coming back. Like, so when you're talking about like, how would a business owner think of this? Just think of it simply economics. If you want to not think about, hey, let's be human to each other. The other aspect is, how do I put more money in my pocket?
I'm going to jump in. I mean, this is already fascinating, so I can't wait until the focus actually jumps off. I do want to get back to something that's on everybody's mind right now, and I'm going to switch back to you, Sarah. We want to talk about voting. We know that BJC is involved in ensuring people vote. And so tell us what you can about the election, what BJC is doing, and how important this is.
Sure. So first, I do want to make one more point about the 18-day focus. So when we were looking for ideas around this, Tracie mentioned originally the 28-day challenge. When we decided to focus on the Jewish community specifically, we realized there wasn't anything ever created like this. So our true hope is that after we're done our 18-day focus and we collect information and data, we really want this to be done in like every other federation in the country. And we're hoping to push that out. So we're really excited about it. But on to voting. So the BJC has always really worked hard in our community to help get people involved and make sure that they're voting. This year, of course, we have spent a bit more time since people are voting by mail for the most part, and it's probably their first time voting by mail. So, you know, we've sent emails, we've posted on social media. We even have a piece we wrote in JMOR by Matt Peterson from our staff to encourage everyone to vote and to vote by mail if they are able to. So just a few quick tips. If you're not registered to vote, you have until October 13th to register. You can request a mail-in ballot by October 20th. And for more information on how to obtain a mail-in ballot, where to drop it off, the dates for early voting, there's going to be a link set by Matt Peterson from our staff on the comments section. So please visit that link. The election is November 3rd, and we do hope everyone in the Jewish community who is able votes.
And just the political comment that I don't know that Sarah wants to say, when the community votes in great numbers, it gives BJC the ability to go to Annapolis and have a lot more leverage. So just from a purely political point of view, however you're going to vote. Because it's nice. Yeah, I see the smile because that's really how it works. The folks in Annapolis listen to the people that vote.
They do. And actually a funny anecdote about that before we end is one of Maryland's, actually Baltimore City elected official, he told me that the first thing he does when a constituent emails him is he checks to see if that constituent is from his district and if they're registered to vote. If they're not registered to vote, his email back simply is, you know, you're not registered to vote. If you want to talk to me, register to vote. That's just what he does.
That's really cool. I do like that, sort of like put your money where your mouth is, or, you know, the line starts behind the people who we know voted. Let me ask everybody, what recommendations, what else beyond the 18-day focus? And I know Scott's gonna ask you to tell us about how to make sure that happens for you. What other recommendations do you have for anyone who's interested in learning more about equality and justice? And that's for all of you.
There are so many resources out there. Right now, a lot of us are really interested. And so there are a lot of resources even within our Jewish community. So the Jewish Museum of Maryland and Hizikamuno are partnering on a program about Jews of color that will be 9 sessions across several months. I know that JCC has one with the Gordon Center also focusing on Jews of color. Na'aleh has something coming. So there are a lot of things happening right here in our Baltimore Jewish community. And then beyond that, shameless self-promotion, I am the co-host of a podcast called Jews Talk Racial Justice with April and Tracie that I do with April Baskin. And there are also a lot of resources out in the world, in non-Jewish sources, thinkers and writers, and find the folks who work for you. Find the podcasts, find the blogs, find the articles, and learn. Yosef, what do you want to add to that?
Well, I'd also add, we're in the middle of time of COVID, so everything is online. Everything. I reached out to a rabbi out on the West Coast, and I was like, how do I get engaged? And he, more in whatever we were talking about, he's like, it's COVID, everything's online. And so just a silver lining, if you will, is that everything is online. A quick Google search, a quick YouTube search, everything's out there. It's being put out. You know, I think there's an obscene amount of hours of YouTube footage go up every second. Everything's out there. Whatever you're looking for, you can do a search of it and you'll find resources. I would start with the newer stuff and work your way back because, like we were talking about, terms and lexicon change over time. but everything's out there, and it's just at the end of your fingertips through a computer keyboard.
Yeah, and I would say, if you look at, New York Times bestseller books right now over the past several months, there are so many books on how to be anti-racist, white supremacy, and the history. And I myself have been listening to NPR's Code Switch every week, which I recommend for everyone. It's, if you're on a long walk while we can still walk outside before it gets too cold, I throw my headphones in and I listen to that once a week. It's really informative, different parts of American history and current events, and with a lot of historical context, with a lot of humor.
Very good. Beth, any other questions?
No, I guess I'm going to actually review some of the things that Tracie spoke of in my closing, but do you want to ask everyone for their shameful self-promotion?
Sure. So let me also throw out there that for Tracie and Yosef, we'd love to have you speak to the folks at JMOR to make sure we cover the program. So let's make sure we coordinate that after this discussion. But talk a little bit about how folks can A, get involved in the challenge, and B, be supportive of the BJC.
So the challenge, you can sign up at baltjc.org/18 days, and that'll take you to the form to sign up and lose the /18 days for their fancy new website where you can see more about the BJC and all that they do. I've forgotten what the other questions were. Somebody else jump in.
Sarah's itching, I can tell.
No, so Tracie's right, and I think also Matt Peterson from our staff will also be linking right now in the comments to sign up for our 18-day focus. I really, like Tracie said, we're gonna be advertising all of the other trainings and events that other Jewish organizations have been putting on, like the J and Hezek Emunah and Na'aleh. So everyone continue to keep getting educated.
Good. And Yosef, anything you want to add here at the end?
They covered it.
Very good. Very good. Beth, some final words?
Yeah, so I just want to thank you all so much for being here. Very much looking forward to hearing more from you all. And for those of you in our audience who are interested in today's topic, as I'm sure you all are, remember to tell your friends to view after this live broadcast is over. We will be available for viewing for their viewing pleasure. So there are other opportunities, as have been touched on, have been mentioned. I'm just going to review. The JCC is hosting a series on the intersection of Black and Jewish identities, and it's called Amplifying Voices. Na'aleh, our Center for Leadership, is hosting a program called Being Jewish in America, and we will explore the American Jewish experience, focusing on what it means that most Jews have become white with all its privileges. Also, the Jewish Museum of Maryland and Hezek Emunah Congregation are hosting a series on Jews of color, Jewish institutions, and the Jewish community. So as we've said, there's lots out there. Please look for it. Go to our website, associated.org, jmoreliving.com, for more information, stories, and resources. And please join us again next Tuesday, October 13th at noon for another great show. And until we see you all again, please stay well.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.